China's economic success, it's well documented. We don't have to talk about that. Of course, her current struggle is also something just as well understood, though not entirely China's fault. But undeniably, a lot of China's current economic problem is China's past policy catching up with her. For the purpose of leading to the designed objective of this talk, let me just outline some of the things that are tied to what I am thinking about. One is the one-child policy. Two, the overexpansion of labor-intensive, export-oriented, and rent-seeking, which is a very politically correct way of saying corruption. Without further ado, let me try and tie some of the issues together. For some of the young people, you do not realize, did China manipulate the exchange rate earlier on? Yes, we did. In 1980s, we intentionally overvalued the yuan. The official exchange rate was 1 to 4. But if you step out of the hotel, you can exchange for 1 to 10 on the street, because that was the only way China could absorb and get hard currency. So that was very different. When I lecture in China, I always try to bring that up, but because of time, I'm going to totally skip this, of course. In the 1990s, mid-1990s, China started to allow FDI to access domestic market. Before that, China was not very successful in attracting FDI. Starting from the mid-1990s, that was when China's FDI started to increase. Again, a lot of the younger faculty and students do not realize that. Making China the largest destination, occasionally surpassing the US. And of course, Miao Jie's presentation yesterday, I found it was very illuminating that by 2015, China's outward FDI was higher than inward. I thought that was very interesting. As a result, China experienced a surge in exports, though hampered by the 1998 East Asia crisis. Joining the WTO, nowadays you look at it as obvious, but you have to understand, especially the young people here, it was very, very controversial. A lot of people were worried China's certain sectors, especially the agricultural sector, was going to collapse. So it was very, very controversial. Of course, nowadays it was sort of obvious. Let me show you a couple of slides. This is China's trade balance in goods and services. You can see what I mean, the surge in the mid-late 1990s with the liberalization of allowing foreign FDIs to access domestic markets. Before that, all FDI output can only be exported. They could not sell in China. And that failed to attract Western FDI. It was mostly Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and overseas Chinese. So with the liberalization of that, we saw the increase here. If you blow it up in this, then this surge is comparable to this. And of course, this is the subprime that we all know about. Next, let me show you, often when I lecture in China, I remind the audience, pretend you are Americans. For the next couple of minutes, pretend you're Americans and see if you understand why Americans have a disliking for China. And this is this slide. This is China's share of American trade deficit, taking out oil. China, oh sorry, I'm just not used to this. China accounts for 83% of American trade deficit. So my fellow Americans, now do you understand why the US has a lot of public opinion that are anti-Chinese? If you are American and you find one country accounts for 83% of your trade deficit, will you be unhappy? Of course you will. So this is something I always bring up when I'm lecturing in China. Now, with that said, Foreign exchange is no longer an issue. Remember I said in 1980 that was the prime objective of manipulating the exchange rate. Even though we've come down somewhat from the peak, but it's still very, very high. Accusations of exchange rate manipulation, I think all of you have heard and know about that. I've written a couple of papers. But our concern now, of course, is the slowdown of economic growth. If you look at it, last year the economic growth was 6.9%, the lowest since 1989. And the projection is it's going to continue to fall. But even with this lower growth rate of China, China single-handedly still accounted for 30% of the world's growth. And that was what Professor Wen was talking about, Professor Yang, Dr. Yang was talking about in terms of China's contribution. If China succeeds, the world succeeds. If China struggles, the world will struggle. In the US, I take every opportunity to try to persuade Americans. The US should wish for a prosperity in China. They should want that, all right? Moving along, of course, the question we can clearly see from this decline, is China's growth sustainable? In recent years, we've talked about, often heard, sustainable growth, and I wanted to highlight this is non-green. We're not talking about environmental issue, including the new normal. We've talked about middle income trap, and I always ask, especially the young people, well, if there's middle income trap, there must be a high income trap. Well, what country wouldn't like to be trapped in a high income trap? It's not a trap. It's paradise. All right? But seriously, if there is a middle income trap, there is also a low income trap. What is the low income trap? Africa is in the low income trap. Why did China engage in the comprehensive reform in 78, 79? It was to break through the low income trap. What is the low income trap? A country struggling to feed its people. Let's look at China's economic reform in 78, 79. 包产到户, dramatically increasing food production. The objective was to feed the people. So this is just to bring it up because I know a lot of people, especially the younger generation, have forgotten that. And I wanted to remind that. And of course, for me personally, I think the question is really the Louisiana turning point. And of course, all three of these are actually the same thing. That's what I said. They're the three sides of the same coin. It's a very strange coin, but it's a three sides of the same coin. To demonstrate this, I love this slide. What is a middle income trap? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the middle income trap. This is traffic congestion. Whole bunch of countries stuck in there cannot break out. This was Japan breaking out. This is South Korea breaking out. In this graph, it does not include Singapore, Taiwan, or Hong Kong. If we included that, that would also be here. What is interesting is this. This is Iran. Iran broke out in the mid-70s. But wide corruption led to the return of the Ayatollah Khomeini, returning Iran to a very conservative religious state, causing the economy to fall down. This is a lesson that China needs to learn in terms of widespread corruption and those issues. I think this is very, very informative. This is a way of showing you just what is the middle income trap. Now, for those of you that are not very familiar with what Louisiana turning point is, it's named after the Nobel Prize winner Arthur Lewis. He talked about in the early stages of development, be it industrialization or economic transition, you have basically an you have an unlimited supply of labor. That means you can expand your industrial sector without having to raise wages, without inflation. Once that surplus labor has been absorbed, then wage increases start to go up, inflation emerges. That is the Louisiana turning point. Now, let's get to one of my key graphs. So if we have unlimited labor supply, I still can't get used to it. I have my own. I should have used my own. If we have unlimited labor supply, it's flat. Wage does not need to increase. This is our original demand for labor. So this is the total value generated. This belongs to the capitalist class. This belongs to the worker. Now imagine, with development, with industrialization, the demand for labor shifts this way. This is the increase to the capitalists. This is the increase to labor. So that's why, before we get to the Louisiana turning point, we actually see an increase in deterioration of income distribution. That's why we do not see the Stoepler-Samuelson effect of increasing exports, yet the intensively used factor, which is labor, their income actually declined. It's because we did not pass the Louisiana turning point. China is probably around here. In my opinion, we've already passed the Louisiana turning point. Further growth, you can see, all of this will transform from the capitalist owning class to the workers because of the rapid increase in wages that will soon have to come. And that's why we see a lot of industries, labor intensive, low value added industries, leaving China because the wage and labor cost is already going up. So I think this is very interesting and explains a lot of things. A couple of years I wrote a paper saying that the Stoepler-Samuelson effect does not apply to China. But once I understood this, I have to go back and slap myself and say I was wrong and write a new paper though. That's the good thing. That's the good thing. So if you look at it, this is wages. We see the rural sector wages have already gone up and stayed up, increase in wages. The urban sector, we started to see it go up, but then we had the subprime. So young scholars, it might be interesting for you to start looking at what is happening now. Of course, with the new normal, that adds a dimension that is somewhat problematic. I will discuss that a little bit. This is very interesting. This is looking at labor income share in China. Notice the sharp drop here. This is when China's exports started to rise, 2004. And remember the graph that I showed? The income share of workers actually would decline, and the capitalist owning, the richer class, would gain. This is very, very evident when you see that. When you see that. Okay. Because of time, I have to control myself. I just want to show you, this is another paper I wrote that was focusing on industrial structural change in China. As I said, China started experiencing labor shortage as early as 2004. Couple of anecdotal evidence. The fact that Foxconn expanded from Longhua and moved to Chengdu, Taiyuan, Wuhan, and Zhengzhou is evidence. Because the migrant workers are no longer coming. So they have to go out and chase the workers. Look at Chengdu. Chengdu, Taiyuan, Wuhan, Zhengzhou, are they all major sources of migrant workers? If migrant workers are no longer coming to Longhua, well, then Foxconn has to go where the migrant workers are coming from. And for the young faculty, young students here, when you were in junior high, when you go to a somewhat decent restaurant, do you have 4 to 8 young women greeting you as you come to the restaurant? Do you see that anymore? No. Does it have anything to do with Secretary Xi's anti-corruption? No. It's because we've run out of workers. That is the best way of looking at it. We don't have those workers anymore. All right? We can talk a lot about that, but given the time constraint, I don't want to discuss this due to that. If anyone are interested, we could discuss afterwards. This is from that paper showing this is the outflow of workers from the farming sector. You can see before we joined the WTO, the main absorption of surplus workers was actually in the service sector. It was only after we joined the WTO did the major absorption come from the industrial sector. And if you look at this sharp rise, it reflects government intervention. It is not the rapidity and the smoothness of the increase, in my opinion, reflects perhaps government guidance. Labor theory, I've written 11 papers on internal migration, and I vowed I will never write one again. Enough is enough. But to draw from some of the papers I've written, you can see the aging of the Chinese rural sector. The percentage of those that are 40 or above already reached close to 50% 7 years ago. It is much higher now. If you look at the supply of migrant workers, it is declining. If you look at the future migrant worker, it is declining also. The best graph to show this is to look at the population under age 14 in China overall. At the beginning of 1970, we had almost 40% of the Chinese population 40 years or younger. And now it's less than 20%. And it's only going to drop. To illustrate this point, this is borrowing from another paper I wrote in 2011. Oh, no, my mistake. This is borrowing from Houㅣ. They projected, if you look at, this report was published in 2010. They projected that from last year, there would be a net negative growth of labor force. This year, there will be a slight increase. Why? Because 2001 was the year of the dragon. 2001是龙年，所以2016增加了一批新的劳动力。So that's Chinese characteristic. What I think is more dramatic is this, China's population pyramid. This is what China's population pyramid looked like in 1990. Looks somewhat like a pyramid. This is what it looks like in 2010. Looks more like a house. This is the projected Chinese population pyramid in 2050. Doesn't look like any pyramid I know. Is this a clear indication of the one-child policy that I led into this discussion? Since 2004, I've been arguing China needs to relax its one-child policy. They are doing that now. Too little, too late. We can produce this pointer in, say, 5 minutes, but it takes 16 years to produce a worker. Pregnancy of 9 months and raising the young child to the age of 15. So it takes 16 years. We have loosened one-child policy, but we're not going to see the impact until 15 years from now. Too little, too late. Had we done that in 2004, we may have a better shot. All right, we may have a better shot. Now, because of time, I'm going to have to very quickly skip some of these. A lot of people, of course, know the white cat, black cat speech of Xiaoping. I view it not just meaning, I don't care whether it's a market system or socialist system, as long as it can bring happiness to the people, it's a good system. I think it goes beyond that. Xiaoping, Comrade Xiaoping, was referring to some form of corruption is acceptable. That is a secondary interpretation of the black cat. Some form of corruption is acceptable. And I think Xiaoping 同志, Comrade Xiaoping already foresaw that. And to save time, let me share with you, this is something, a paper I'm working on. This is what I call economic efficiency, E1, for Jiang Zemin. This is the social political cost under Jiang Zemin. So, Secretary Jiang Zemin's policy, if we let it run its course, it will bring us eventually to here. But of course, Secretary Jiang, his term ended over here. And the gap between the red and the blue is the reform dividend. The reform dividend. Now, let's move on to economic efficiency 2. That would be Hu Jintao. Unfortunately, yes, it's becoming more efficient. But unfortunately, the social political cost is also rising. So, the natural end of Secretary Hu's policy would be here. Would be here. Of course, again, his term ended over here. Now, let's look at Secretary Xi. With further reform, we do believe economic reform efficiency will increase. But as you see, as we become flatter and flatter, net gains become smaller and smaller. But social political cost is becoming bigger also. So, economic reform dividend is fast evaporating. So, Secretary Xi, he had no choice. He has to carry out massive anti-corruption to lower the social political cost to perhaps C3 prom. Of course, whether he is going to bring all the way to C3 prom or C3 prom, a more modest objective, that is what we are waiting to see. But regardless, it has come to the point that we have to do it. Because the social political cost is growing at exponentially rate. That is the issue. Since everybody here should be fairly, I do want to discuss this, especially since my co-author, Zhang Kun, made all the way from Jilin. He was supposed to come yesterday, but because of the smog, his plane could not land. He had to take a train to come here today. This is a paper we are working on, and I'm hoping to submit that either later this year or next year. We use Oli Paik's decomposition, TFP. I just very quickly. We look at the growth of productivity. We separate that into two components. So the change in TFP is due to the change in the mean of the distribution and the covariance of the market share and the efficiency of a particular firm. That's the key point. Let me share you with one of our key results. Yes, overall, productivity did improve, but this is the troubling point. The covariance between the market share and firm efficiency are negatively correlated. So it's not the efficient firms that are getting bigger market shares. It's the less efficient firms that are getting bigger market shares. And we feel this is potentially hinting at corruption. Think about that. For example, Chun Li and I are both in the same industry. He is more efficient than I am, but I am the classmate of the governor's son. Need I say more? So this may reflect this. So that's what we're a little bit concerned about. To save time, because I've already actually ran out of time, what I'm trying to argue is that why do we have the new normal? Secretary Xi announced he is no longer using GDP as a measure of performance. Anti-corruption. These combined local officials have absolutely no incentive to work. The more I work, the more attention I get from above. Anti-corruption attention. If I don't do anything, I won't make any mistakes. So there's no surprise there. So One Belt, One Road, all of you can go online and understand. I spent a considerable amount of time in this to talk about comparing One Belt, One Road with the Marshall Plan. I believe they are totally unrelated. Marshall Plan is short-term, limited in focus. One Belt, One Road will take a minimum of 20 years. That's why my title was, Is it water too far? 远水救不了近火. All right? It's not going to affect China in a favorable way quick enough to get us out of the new normal conundrum. To save time, what I would like to propose, let me move down very quickly to the very end. I am proposing that General Secretary Xi targets green GDP as the measure of performance. It'll allow him a way out. I am not going back to GDP as a performance. I'm concerned about the environment. That's why it's green GDP. It'll allow him a way out. And what do we mean by green GDP? To make it easy, we generated a green index. I can share with you how it's computed. So if you look at it, our green GDP is a multiplicative, sort of like a Cobb-Douglas function. Green GDP is the green index times the nominal GDP. So the growth rate of green GDP is simply the sum of the growth rate of these two components. So a governor can achieve a higher growth of green GDP with a little bit of improvement of environment and a bigger boost in nominal GDP. That will allow us to see a much quicker result in a total growth and also improve the environment. Of course, if we are really concerned about the environment, we can change it a little bit. We make it to green index squared. That will put double the weight on environmental improvement. Just like what we learned in micro. All right, what we learned in micro. I do want to share with you, as bad as our smog is, let me share with you. Have you noticed, in every case, including down here, did we have a sharp drop here? 2006, the 11th five-year plan mandated a 10% reduction on energy use and carbon emissions. So we immediately saw that. If we did not have that policy, it could have been worse. So in my paper, I said we have to give credit where credit is due. China has tried. Should it try harder? Of course. Thank you.